Hey, hello guys. How are you today? I hope your mood is incredible and your day is going jolly good. So today we are going to talk about conditionals. Conditional is one of the most important part of English grammar. It's very integral, always used, very often used. So let's deal with it. Conditional. Conditional is a subjunctive mood. Now what is a subjunctive mood? That's very important to know. Subjunctive mood expresses an action of a verb which is presented as a non-fact. That is something which is imaginary or desirable. If I put it in a very simple way, conditional can be real or unreal. Now, how to understand whether the sentence is real or unreal? Let's go further. So, we have 5 different types of conditional. We have the zero conditional, first conditional, second conditional, third conditional, and last but not the least, mixed conditional. Zero conditional, first conditional, second conditional and third conditional are very important to understand, because without understanding these you cannot understand mixed. That's the rule. But today we are going to talk only about zero conditional. So before we even start with examples, first we have to know the structure of conditional sentences. The structure. So, a conditional sentence consists of 2 main parts. The first one is the if clause. The second one is the relative clause, or it's also called the result clause. Now, in this structure or in this pattern, you see 2 main components. The first component is if, and the second component is that both these parts are divided, or you can say separated, by a punctuation, which is what you call this? Yes, you're absolutely right, this is a comma. So 2 main components, that is if and comma. Now let me tell you something about if. If. Generally, in conditional sentences, we can replace if with other words too. Now what are those words? For example, otherwise, or, unless, in case of, provided, suppose, when, and there are many more, of course, but we will use only if. I will concentrate only on if. You know why? Because there are 3 main reasons for that. Number 1, it is easy to pronounce. It is easy to use, and it is very easy to remember. As I told you, I want to make conditionals very easy to use. So I'm going to use only if. And thank you for allowing me to do so. Well, the structure. Once again, if clause, comma, relative clause. What is very important about this type of sentence or this type of structure or pattern is that you can write a conditional sentence in this order, that is if clause, comma, relative clause, or you can interchange the positions of these 2 parts. What I mean to say is, you can write it 2 ways. if clause, comma, relative clause, or relative clause, comma, if clause. And believe me, and it is true, both the sentences have the same meaning. I will explain you that when we do the examples. Okay, I hope it becomes easy for you to understand the structure, and of course, if you remember the structure, to make the sentences will be even much more easier. So, let's start. Zero conditional. Now, before we start with examples, very important is to know the definition of zero conditional. So, zero conditional, they are facts that are generally true, and they are scientific facts. That means they are scientifically proven. That is something that is coming from the nature. You can't change the rule of the nature. So whatever comes from the nature, it is totally from God. I hope you understand that. Well, so zero conditional are facts that are generally true, and they are scientific facts. That means facts that are scientifically proven. Well, let's start the examples. First example, if the sun shines, the day becomes hot. Now look at the sentence, please. Let's analyze this sentence. We use if, which is the if clause, the first part of the sentence. Then we put a comma, and the second part is the relative clause. Good. So this is the structure. Now, we are not missing the two main components, as I told you before, and once again going to remind you, if the main component, the second component is comma. Okay, so look at the sentence once again. If the sun shines, you know the sun shines, it is generally true. The sun, of course, it does not cry tears, it does not snow, it does not form clouds, it shines. The day becomes hot. If the sun shines, the day becomes hot. Scientifically proven. Yes, of course. If the sun shines, obviously the day becomes hot. So we have if, and look at this sentence here. In the if clause, if plus and this sentence. This sentence is totally in present simple. Present simple tense. Look at the subject. The subject is in singular, and the verb has an S ending. Why? Because the subject is in singular. So if plus present simple sentence, comma, and you see here also is a present simple sentence where the subject is the day, singular, becomes with an S ending because day is singular. So the construction here is if plus present simple, comma, present simple. Now look at that sentence. Isn't that sentence very easy? Very easy to analyze, very easy to understand, and obviously very easy to use right now. Okay, I hope you understand that sentence. Let's try another one. If the ice melts, it turns into water. If the main component, comma, the second most important component. Good. If clause, relative clause. Well done. Now look at the sentence. If plus present simple tense sentence, we see the subject is in singular. That is why the verb melt has an S in the end. And here is present simple once again. We see it is a subject which is in singular, and here please pay attention, this is not a verb, this is a phrasal verb. I just gave an extra example so that I could use a different form here. This was the verb here in the earlier sentence, and this one is a phrasal verb. You know that a phrasal verb has a verb and a preposition. So turns into, if I want to change this phrasal verb into a verb, then turns into means changes. So if the eye smells, it changes into water, or if the eye smells, it turns into water. So look at the sentence once again. If plus present simple and present simple. Now, if the eye smells, generally true, it melts. It does not melt into gold, of course. It does not melt into popcorn, not even chocolate. But it melts, and what happens? It turns into water. Scientifically proven. Now, isn't that very easy? Of course. Genuinely easy. Hip hip hurrah. Okay. Let's go to the third sentence. Let's go down to earth. Let's talk about human beings. Yeah, we are talking all about scientific things and, generally true and etc. Let's talk about human beings. So, look at the sentence. If the managers leave the office, Ron takes their calls. So look at the sentence. We have the if clause and we have the relative clause. We have if, the most important component, and the second most important component, the comma. Good. Now look at the sentence. If plus this sentence is in present simple tense. Why? Because the managers, that's the subject. But look at the managers. It has an S. That means this subject is in plural. So when the subject is in plural, you know that in present simple the verb will have no endings at all. It will be in the first form of the verb. So if the managers leave the office, Ron takes their calls. Ron. Here this sentence is also in present simple. We see Ron is a subject which is singular, one person, and takes, which is the verb, and has an S in the end. Why? Because Ron has a subject is singular. So if the managers leave the office, Ron takes their calls. That means if the managers leave the office, generally too, they have to leave the office because they may be going for some meeting, or maybe they'll be on some business trip and etc. and someone has to take their calls. So who's responsible? Ron is responsible to take their calls. That is generally true. I hope you understood. Very good. Very nice. Splendid. So, we understand that if the sun shines, the day becomes hot. If the ice melts, it turns into water. If the manager leaves the office, Ron takes their calls. Now, remember I told you earlier, while explaining the structure, we can start the sentence with an if clause and end with a relative clause. But there is another version too. We can interchange. We can start the sentence with a relative clause and then end it with an if clause. Now let's try and change all these three sentences, these three examples, in the second version. So we'll interchange and see if the meaning is the same. So let's try. The day becomes hot if the sun shines. Now is that sentence correct or wrong? Absolutely correct. Genuinely correct. Authentically correct. Yes, you can either use it if the sun shines, the day becomes hot, or you can say the day becomes hot if the sun shines. Both the sentences have the same meaning. Now let's try the second one. If the ice melts, it turns into water. Now let's interchange. It turns into water if the ice melts. Now is that sentence correct or wrong? Well, I should tell you that it's slightly wrong. I'll tell you why. Because you see, what is eating me right now, which is giving me headache, is this it here. Generally, when you start a sentence, you're supposed to express what you're exactly talking about. So you have to do what? In this case is, you have to change this pronoun to the noun, and this noun to the pronoun. So let's try. The ice turns into water if it melts. So once again, if the ice melts, it turns into water. The ice turns into water if it melts. Now tell me please, are both the sentences correct? Yes, both of them are correct. Do they have the same meaning? Yes, absolutely right. They have the same meaning. Not a single change in the meaning. No difference at all. Good. Now let's try the third example. Please be very attentive. Pay a lot of attention here. If the managers leave the office, Ron takes their calls. Now let's interchange. Ron takes their calls if the manager leaves the office. Now what do you think? Like the previous sentence, is this sentence correct or wrong? What I should say is it's a little bit wrong. I'll tell you why. You see this there. Now for me, what if I ask a person a question, what is this there? What is this? Or who is this there? It sounds like a plenty of flowers, a bunch of flowers maybe, or bunch of sheep, for example, blankets maybe, who knows, ice creams. What is it there? What is this word? What does it denote? So, what we have to do in this case, when you interchange these sentences, when you start the sentence with a relative clause and then with an if clause, you should remember that the first information should be exact so that person understands what you are speaking about. So what we do here, we have to change this pronoun. This is a possessive pronoun, of course. You have to change this pronoun to a noun, and this noun you have to change to what? Not there. There is a possessive noun. You have to change this to a nominative pronoun. Now what's a nominative pronoun? That is I, we, you, they, he, she, it. Since managers, it's plural, so there becomes they. Good. So Ron takes the manager's calls if they leave the office. Okay. Now let's talk about the previous sentence, that is the original sentence. If the managers leave the office, Ron takes their calls. Now let's interchange. Ron takes the manager's calls if they leave the office. Now do you find any difference between these two sentences? Not at all. Absolutely not. Both of them have the same meaning. Well folks, I hope today's lesson was easy for you. I hope you understood that zero conditional is dead easy. Nothing to fear, nothing to be shy of. You can express without any problems, without any failures. And I'm sure, starting with zero conditionals, your English is getting better. Well then, this is all for today. Have a nice day, and I'm very curious to meet you all. Goodbye.